The cold bit through my jacket like 1,000 tiny needles as I stepped off the plane onto the cracked tarmac of the remote Alaskan airstrip. The sky was a dull gray, heavy with clouds that promised snow, and the wind howled like a restless spirit through the skeletal trees. I'd signed up for this assignment without fully understanding what I was getting into, a government research team sent to investigate a newly uncovered site deep in the Alaskan wilderness. The official briefing was vague, almost deliberately so. Ancient artifacts, they said. Potentially groundbreaking. But the truth, I would soon learn, was far stranger than any report or memo could capture. I was a surveyor by trade, used to measuring land, mapping boundaries, and checking soil samples. Usually, my work was mundane: fields, construction sites, places no one cared about. But this was different. This was a place where the earth itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to be found. The team was small, tight-lipped, and mostly military or scientific personnel with clearances I didn't have. I was the outsider, the civilian brought in for my technical skills, but I quickly realized I was also the one who would see things no one else wanted to acknowledge. Our base camp was a cluster of weather-beaten trailers and tents set against a backdrop of towering pines and jagged mountains. The air smelled of pine resin and something else, something metallic and old, like rusted iron buried beneath the soil. The site itself was a few miles away, accessible only by a rough dirt road that twisted through the forest like a serpent. The government had cordoned off the area, warning locals to stay clear, but rumors had already spread through the nearby towns. Whispers of strange lights, odd sounds, and shadows moving where no one should be. On the first day, we hiked out to the dig site. The ground was frozen solid, cracked in places like the skin of some ancient beast. The team set up equipment, ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors, and drones to map the area from above. I followed behind, my boots crunching on the frost-hardened earth, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down on us. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches bare and skeletal against the gray sky. We began our survey in a clearing where the earth had been disturbed recently. The radar showed strange anomalies beneath the surface, shapes that didn't match any natural formation. Rectangular outlines, sharp edges, and what looked like tunnels or chambers. The scientists speculated about an ancient settlement, maybe a lost civilization buried under the permafrost. But the shapes were too precise, too deliberate. They didn't look like ruins. They looked like something built. That night, I lay in my tent staring at the thin canvas walls, listening to the wind moan through the trees. The others were quiet, their conversations hushed and tense. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the forest itself was alive and waiting. I thought about the stories I'd heard growing up, legends of spirits trapped beneath the ice, of things older than time itself lurking in the shadows. I told myself it was just the isolation, the cold playing tricks on my mind. The next morning, we descended into the first chamber. The entrance was a narrow shaft, barely wide enough for one person, carved into the frozen earth. The air inside was stale and cold, carrying a faint metallic tang. Our lights cut through the darkness, revealing walls covered in strange markings, symbols that looked like a mix of ancient runes and something else, something alien. The deeper we went, the more the air seemed to thicken, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. We found artifacts, tools made of a metal I couldn't identify, smooth and dark, almost black but with a faint iridescent sheen. Bones, too, but not human. Long, thin, and fragile, like the remains of creatures that had never walked the Earth's surface. The scientists were fascinated, but I felt a growing unease. This place wasn't just old. It was wrong. It didn't belong here, or maybe anywhere. As we mapped the tunnels, we discovered chambers filled with strange machinery, devices that hummed faintly, powered by some unseen energy. Screens flickered to life when we approached, displaying symbols and images that made no sense. The team tried to rationalize it: ancient technology, lost knowledge, a civilization far more advanced than we imagined. But I saw something else. Something darker. One night, the power in the camp flickered and died. The radios went silent. The forest outside seemed to close in, the shadows stretching longer and darker. I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the camp. When I shone my flashlight into the trees, nothing was there. But the feeling of being hunted didn't leave me. The next day, one of the scientists disappeared. No trace, no sign of struggle. Just gone. The team was shaken, but the mission continued. We had to know what was down there, what secrets the Earth was hiding. I volunteered to go deeper, to explore the lower levels of the tunnels. The elevator was a relic, a rusted cage that groaned as it descended into the blackness. The air grew colder, the walls slick with moisture. At the bottom, we found a vast cavern, lit by an eerie blue glow. The floor was covered in strange plants, bioluminescent and pulsing with light. The air smelled of decay and something sweet, intoxicating. In the center of the cavern stood a monolith, a towering structure covered in the same symbols we'd seen on the walls. It pulsed with energy, a heartbeat that seemed to echo in my chest. As I approached, the ground trembled, and a voice whispered in my mind, ancient and terrible. I stumbled back, heart racing. The elevator was my only way out, but the path was blocked by shadows that moved with a will of their own. I pressed the button, and the cage shuddered to life, rising through the darkness. When I emerged, the camp was silent, empty. The others were gone. I don't know what I found down there, or what it wanted. But I know this, some things buried beneath the earth should never be disturbed. And some doors, once opened, can never be closed. The cold air outside the elevator hit me like a slap, but the silence was worse. The camp was deserted, tents flapping weakly in the wind, equipment abandoned mid-use. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just empty space where my team had been. My heart pounded, each beat echoing in the hollow quiet. I called out, voice cracking, but only the wind answered. The forest seemed to lean in, waiting. I grabbed my gear, the weight grounding me, and started searching. The ground was frozen, but patches of earth were disturbed, as if something large had moved through. I followed the trail, careful not to lose the faint tracks that led toward the trees. The deeper I went, the heavier the air felt, thick with a scent I couldn't place, something ancient, like dust and decay mixed with cold metal. Suddenly, a low hum vibrated through the ground beneath my boots. I froze, scanning the shadows. The hum grew louder, a pulse that seemed to sync with my heartbeat. Then, from the darkness between the trees, a faint glow appeared, blue, like the cavern below. It flickered, then steadied, revealing a figure standing just beyond the tree-line. It was tall, impossibly so, with limbs too long and thin to be human. Its skin shimmered faintly, like wet stone, and its eyes glowed with a cold, unblinking light. It didn't move, just watched, as if waiting for me to make the next move. I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to run, but my feet were rooted. The figure stepped forward, and the ground beneath it seemed to ripple, distorting the air like heat haze. It raised a hand, long fingers curling into a gesture I couldn't understand. Then, without warning, it vanished, dissolving into the shadows like smoke. I stumbled back, heart racing, and turned to run. Branches clawed at my face, roots snagged my boots, but I didn't stop. The forest seemed to close behind me, swallowing the path. When I finally burst back into the clearing where the elevator stood, the doors were shut tight, the panel dark. I pounded on the metal, desperate. The elevator groaned, then the doors slid open, inviting me back inside. I hesitated, but the forest silence was worse than any unknown below. I stepped in, pressed the button for the lowest level, and the cage began its slow descent. The darkness swallowed me again, but this time, the air was different, thicker, colder, and filled with whispers I couldn't place. The elevator shuddered, lights flickering as it passed through levels I hadn't seen before. Each floor was a fragment of something lost, rooms filled with echoes, shadows of people who had never existed. At one point, the elevator stopped abruptly. The doors opened onto a narrow corridor lined with mirrors. I stepped out, and my reflection stared back, only it wasn't quite right. The eyes were too wide, the smile too sharp, and the face twisted in a way that made my skin crawl. I blinked, and the reflection grinned, a slow, deliberate curl of lips that didn't match my own. I slammed the doors shut and pressed the button again. The elevator jolted, descending further into the abyss. The whispers grew louder, voices overlapping in a chorus of forgotten names and warnings. I covered my ears, but the sound seeped into my bones. When the doors opened again, I found myself in a vast chamber filled with ancient machinery, gears turning without power, lights flickering in impossible patterns. The walls pulsed with a faint blue glow, and the air smelled of ozone and rust. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a small, glowing orb that seemed to pulse with life. I reached out, fingers trembling, and the moment I touched it, the room shifted. The walls melted away, replaced by endless darkness. I was falling, tumbling through a void where time and space lost meaning. Faces appeared in the blackness, twisted, screaming, pleading, and then vanished as quickly as they came. I landed hard on cold stone, breath knocked out of me. The orb was gone, but the whispers remained, now a roar in my mind. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, and saw a figure approaching through the darkness. It was the same tall, thin being from the forest, but now it was closer, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. It spoke without words, a voice inside my head that chilled me to the core. "You were not meant to come here," it said. "This place is a prison, a memory, a warning. You carry the mark now." I tried to speak, but no sound came. The figure reached out, and I felt a cold touch on my neck, the same sensation from before, a burning that wasn't pain but something worse. It was like a seed planted deep inside me, growing with every heartbeat. The figure stepped back, fading into the darkness, leaving me alone in the void. I stumbled toward a faint light in the distance, the only sign of an exit. As I moved, the whispers followed, growing louder, more insistent. I reached the light and found myself back in the elevator. The doors closed behind me, and the cage began its slow ascent. The whispers faded, replaced by the hum of the machinery. When the elevator finally stopped, the doors opened onto the empty clearing once more. The forest was silent, the wind still. My gear was soaked, my body trembling, but I was alive. I stepped out, the weight of what I'd experienced pressing down on me like a stone. I don't know what the mark means, or what the figure wanted. But I know one thing for certain: some doors, once opened, change you forever. And some places are better left buried beneath the ice. The sky was a dull, oppressive gray as I made my way back to the camp, each step heavier than the last. The forest around me seemed to hold its breath, the trees standing like silent sentinels watching my every move. My mind raced, trying to piece together what I had just experienced, but the memories felt fragmented, like shards of a broken mirror reflecting a nightmare I couldn't fully grasp. Back at the camp, the trailers were still empty, the equipment untouched. I found a small heater and sat down, trying to warm my shaking hands. The cold wasn't just outside anymore, it had settled deep inside me, a chill that no fire could burn away. I pulled out my notebook, hoping to write down what I could remember, but the words felt inadequate, like trying to capture smoke in a jar. The others were gone. No sign of struggle, no clues, just silence. I tried the radios again, dead air. The satellite phones were useless here, the signal swallowed by the dense forest and the thick clouds overhead. I was alone, truly alone, with only the echoes of what I'd seen to keep me company. That night, sleep was impossible. Every shadow in the tent seemed to move, every creak of the wind a whisper of something watching. I kept the flashlight close, its beam a fragile barrier against the darkness pressing in. I thought about the figure, the tall, thin being with eyes like burning coals. What was it? A guardian? A prisoner? Or something far worse? The burning on my neck throbbed, a constant reminder that I was marked. I tried to ignore it, but it was always there, a slow, creeping heat that spread beneath my skin. I caught myself touching it more than once, as if trying to erase the sensation by sheer will. The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay. Whatever this place was, it wasn't just a dig site or a research project. It was a trap, a puzzle designed to lure people in and never let them go. I packed my gear, ready to leave, but as I stepped outside, the forest greeted me with a new kind of silence, one that felt like a warning. I followed the dirt road back toward the airstrip, but the path seemed to twist and shift beneath my feet. Trees that had been on my left were now on my right. Landmarks disappeared or appeared where they shouldn't. The forest was rearranging itself, a living maze designed to keep me inside. Panic rose in my chest. I tried to retrace my steps, but the trail was gone, swallowed by the earth or hidden by shadows. The sky darkened, clouds thickening until the world was plunged into a twilight that felt unnatural. I was lost, trapped in a place that defied logic and reason. Then, through the gloom, I saw it, a faint glow, blue and pulsing, just like the cavern and the figure's eyes. It flickered between the trees, beckoning me forward. Against every instinct, I moved toward it, drawn by a force I couldn't resist. The glow led me to a clearing I hadn't seen before. In the center stood the elevator doors, but this time, they were different. The metal was polished, almost reflective, and the panel beside them was alive with buttons glowing in a spectrum of colors I couldn't name. I reached out, fingers trembling, and pressed the button for the surface. The doors slid open silently, revealing a staircase spiraling upward into darkness. I hesitated, then stepped inside, the air thick with anticipation and dread. The stairs wound endlessly, the walls closing in and expanding in impossible ways. I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting. At times, the path seemed to loop back on itself, forcing me to confront the same shadows and whispers over and over. Halfway up, I found a door set into the wall. It was old, wooden, with iron hinges rusted by time. I pushed it open and stepped into a room filled with relics, ancient tools, faded photographs, and journals written in languages I couldn't read. The air smelled of dust and forgotten memories. I picked up a journal, its pages brittle but legible. The entry spoke of a civilization lost beneath the ice, a people who had mastered the earth and sky but had been consumed by their own creations. They wrote of a guardian, a being born from the earth itself, tasked with protecting the secrets buried deep below. The last entry was a warning: do not awaken the ancient. The mark is a curse, a bond that ties the living to the dead. Escape is a dream. The elevator is the only path, but it leads to the heart of darkness. A chill ran down my spine. I closed the journal and stepped back into the stairwell, the door sealing behind me with a finality that echoed in the silence. I climbed the rest of the way, each step heavier than the last, until I reached the surface. The sky was still gray, the wind still cold, but the forest was gone. In its place was an empty field, stretching out under a sky too vast to comprehend. I walked to the edge of the field and looked back. The elevator doors were gone, vanished as if they had never existed. The only sign of the place was the faint hum beneath the earth, a heartbeat that promised the ancient was still waiting, still watching. I got in my truck and drove away, the weight of the mark burning beneath my skin. I don't know if I'll ever escape it, or if the ancient will come for me when the time is right. But one thing is certain: some secrets are buried for a reason, and some doors should never be opened. The road stretched out before me, a ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through the endless expanse of tundra and frozen forest. The truck's engine hummed steadily beneath me, a small comfort against the gnawing unease that had settled deep in my bones. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those glowing eyes watching from the shadows, but there was nothing, just the empty road and the gray sky pressing down like a weight. I tried to focus on the mundane: the hum of the engine, the crunch of tires on gravel, the rhythm of the windshield wipers sweeping away the fine drizzle that had started to fall. But my mind kept drifting back to the elevator, the endless descent, the impossible rooms, and that figure, the guardian, or whatever it was, that had marked me. The burning on my neck was a constant reminder, a silent promise that I wasn't free. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. I lost track of time. The landscape blurred into a monotony of snow-dusted trees and frozen rivers. I stopped only once, at a small roadside diner, the kind of place where the coffee was strong and the locals eyed strangers with suspicion. I ordered a black coffee and sat in a corner booth, trying to collect my thoughts. The waitress was an older woman with tired eyes and a knowing smile. When I mentioned the research site, her face tightened. "You don't want to go poking around up there," she said quietly. "Some things are better left buried. The land remembers, and it doesn't forgive." I nodded, but I didn't tell her about the elevator, the tunnels, or the figure. How could I? Even now, the memory felt like a fever dream, a story too strange to be true. But the mark on my neck burned hotter, and I knew it was real. Back on the road, I tried to call my supervisor, but the line was dead. No signal, no voicemail, just silence. I left messages, but I doubted anyone would answer. The government had been tight-lipped from the start, and now it felt like they were erasing me, wiping away any trace of what had happened. That night, I pulled over to rest in a small motel on the edge of a forgotten town. The room was cheap and smelled of mildew, but it was warm. I locked the door, drew the curtains, and sat on the bed, staring at the mark on my neck in the mirror. It was faint now, a dark smudge beneath the skin, but I could feel it pulsing, alive. Sleep came in fits and starts, haunted by dreams of the cavern, the glowing orb, and the endless forest beneath the earth. I saw faces, twisted, desperate, and silent, reaching out from the shadows. I woke gasping, heart pounding, the room cold despite the heater humming softly. The next morning, I found a message slipped under the door. No handwriting, just a single word typed on a scrap of paper: return. Panic surged through me. Who had left it? How had they found me? I looked out the window, but the street was empty, the town silent. I packed my things quickly, the sense of being hunted closing in. I decided to head north, away from the town, away from the road. If the mark was a curse, maybe the wilderness could hide me. I drove until the pavement ended, then switched to hiking boots and a backpack, moving into the dense forest. The trees closed around me, the canopy thick and dark. The air was colder here, sharper, filled with the scent of pine and earth. I moved carefully, following a map I'd drawn from memory, but the forest seemed to shift, paths disappearing and reappearing like a living maze. At night, I camped under the stars, the firelight flickering against the shadows. I kept watch, senses on edge, every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves setting my heart racing. The mark burned faintly, a reminder that I was not alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard a voice, a whisper carried on the wind, soft and distant. It called my name, a sound both familiar and alien. I froze, scanning the darkness, but saw nothing. The voice came again, closer this time, weaving through the trees like a song. I followed it, drawn by a force I couldn't resist, until I reached a clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center stood a stone altar, ancient and weathered, covered in the same symbols I'd seen in the tunnels. The air thrummed with energy, and the mark on my neck flared, burning bright. I reached out to touch the altar, and the world shifted. The forest faded, replaced by the endless darkness of the cavern. The glowing orb hovered before me, pulsing with light and shadow. The guardian appeared beside it, eyes blazing. "You carry the mark," it said, voice echoing in my mind. "You are bound to the ancient. There is no escape." I tried to speak, to ask why, but the words caught in my throat. The orb pulsed faster, and the cavern trembled. Then, everything went black. The darkness pressed in from all sides, thick and suffocating, like a living thing intent on swallowing me whole. I couldn't tell if I was falling or standing still, if time had stopped or stretched into infinity. The only constant was the pulsing light of the orb, a heartbeat in the void that seemed to echo my own. When the blackness finally lifted, I found myself back in the clearing, the stone altar cold beneath my fingertips. The forest was silent, the moonlight pale and distant. The mark on my neck had dimmed, but the burning remained, a slow, steady ache that refused to fade. I stumbled back into the trees, heart pounding, mind racing. The guardian's words echoed in my head, "You are bound to the ancient. There is no escape." What did that mean? Was I cursed? Chosen? Or something else entirely? I moved through the forest in a daze, the trees looming like giants, their branches clawing at the sky. The path twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the wilderness, away from anything familiar. The air grew colder, the shadows longer, and the sense of being watched intensified. After what felt like hours, I reached a river, a ribbon of ice and dark water cutting through the landscape. The current was swift beneath the frozen surface, and the banks were lined with jagged rocks and twisted roots. I followed the river upstream, hoping it would lead me somewhere, anywhere. As dawn broke, the first light revealed a strange sight, a series of stone pillars rising from the water, covered in the same ancient symbols. They formed a circle, half submerged and worn by time. The air here was thick with energy, a hum that vibrated through the ground and into my bones. I stepped into the circle, and the world shifted again. The river's surface rippled, and the water glowed with an eerie blue light. Faces appeared beneath the ice, ghostly, distorted, and silent. They reached out with translucent hands, their eyes pleading. I tried to pull away, but the water's pull was strong, dragging me toward the center of the circle. Panic surged, and I fought against the current, muscles burning. Just as I felt myself slipping beneath the ice, a hand, cold and firm, grabbed my wrist. I was pulled back onto the shore, gasping for breath. The guardian stood before me, eyes glowing with an otherworldly fire. "You cannot run," it said. "The ancient calls to you, and you must answer." I wanted to scream, to fight, but my voice was lost in the cold air. The mark on my neck flared, and I felt a surge of power, dark, ancient, and terrifying. It was as if something inside me had awakened, something that had been waiting for centuries. The guardian stepped back, fading into the mist. I was alone again, the river's hum fading into silence. I knew then that my life had changed forever. I was no longer just a surveyor, a researcher, I was part of something much older, something that defied understanding. I made my way back to the truck, the forest closing behind me like a living cage. The road ahead was uncertain, the path dark and twisted. But I had no choice. I had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As I drove away from the clearing, the mark burned brighter, a constant reminder that the ancient was watching, waiting. And I was bound to it, whether I wanted to be or not. The road back to civilization felt endless, a ribbon of gray cutting through the frozen wilderness. The truck's headlights barely pierced the thickening fog that rolled in like a living thing, swallowing the world around me. The mark on my neck pulsed with a dull heat, a constant reminder that I was tethered to something far beyond my understanding. I tried to focus on the mundane, counting the cracks in the pavement, the rhythm of the windshield wipers, but my mind kept drifting back to the cavern, the glowing orb, and the guardian's words. "You are bound to the ancient." What did that mean? Was I a prisoner now? A vessel? Or something worse? I stopped at a small gas station on the edge of a forgotten town. The place was deserted, the flickering neon sign casting eerie shadows across the cracked pavement. Inside, the shelves were half empty, and the air smelled stale. I grabbed a bottle of water and a map, hoping to find a way out of this nightmare. The clerk was an old man with eyes that seemed too knowing, too tired. When I mentioned the research site, he nodded slowly. "You've seen it, then," he said. "The ancient doesn't let go easily. You're lucky to be alive." I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head. "Some things are better left alone. The land remembers, and it doesn't forgive." Back on the road, I tried calling my supervisor again. No answer. No voicemail. Just silence. It was as if the government had erased me, wiped away any trace of what had happened. I felt like a ghost, drifting through a world that no longer recognized me. That night, I found a cheap motel and collapsed onto the bed, exhaustion pulling me under. The mark on my neck burned brighter in the darkness, a silent scream beneath my skin. I tried to sleep, but the dreams came, visions of the cavern, the glowing orb, and the endless forest beneath the earth. Faces appeared in the shadows, twisted, desperate, and silent, reaching out with translucent hands. I woke gasping, heart pounding, the room cold despite the heater humming softly. The next morning, I found a note slipped under the door. No handwriting, just a single word typed on a scrap of paper: return. Panic surged through me. Who had left it? How had they found me? I looked out the window, but the street was empty, the town silent. I packed my things quickly, the sense of being hunted closing in. I decided to head north, away from the town, away from the road. If the mark was a curse, maybe the wilderness could hide me. I drove until the pavement ended, then switched to hiking boots and a backpack, moving into the dense forest. The trees closed around me, the canopy thick and dark. The air was colder here, sharper, filled with the scent of pine and earth. I moved carefully, following a map I'd drawn from memory, but the forest seemed to shift, paths disappearing and reappearing like a living maze. At night, I camped under the stars, the firelight flickering against the shadows. I kept watch, senses on edge, every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves setting my heart racing. The mark burned faintly, a reminder that I was not alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard a voice, a whisper carried on the wind, soft and distant. It called my name, a sound both familiar and alien. I froze, scanning the darkness, but saw nothing. The voice came again, closer this time, weaving through the trees like a song. I followed it, drawn by a force I couldn't resist, until I reached a clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center stood a stone altar, ancient and weathered, covered in the same symbols I'd seen in the tunnels. The air thrummed with energy, and the mark on my neck flared, burning bright. I reached out to touch the altar, and the world shifted. The forest faded, replaced by the endless darkness of the cavern. The glowing orb hovered before me, pulsing with light and shadow. The guardian appeared beside it, eyes blazing. "You carry the mark," it said, voice echoing in my mind. "You are bound to the ancient. There is no escape." I tried to speak, to ask why, but the words caught in my throat. The orb pulsed faster, and the cavern trembled. Then, everything went black. The blackness was absolute, a void so complete it swallowed every thought, every breath. Time lost meaning. I was suspended in nothingness, weightless and alone, yet somehow aware of a presence, something vast and ancient, watching from the depths beyond comprehension. Slowly, the darkness began to recede, replaced by a faint, eerie glow. I found myself standing once more in the cavern, the walls alive with pulsing blue light. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something metallic, sharp and biting. The glowing orb hovered before me, its light casting long shadows that danced across the rough stone. The guardian stood beside it, taller and more imposing than before. Its eyes burned with an intensity that pierced through the gloom, and its voice echoed inside my mind, resonant and commanding. "You have been chosen," it said. "The mark binds you to the ancient. You are the key to what comes next." I wanted to ask what that meant, to demand answers, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I felt a surge of energy course through me, cold and electric, spreading from the mark on my neck to every nerve ending. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and yet strangely familiar, as if something deep inside me had been waiting for this moment. The cavern shifted around me, walls melting into endless corridors lined with symbols that seemed to writhe and change when I looked away. I realized then that this place was alive, a living memory of a civilization long lost to time. The ancient had not just built this place, they had become it. The guardian gestured toward a doorway carved from the stone itself. "Beyond this lies the heart of the ancient. You must enter and face what awaits." I hesitated, fear clawing at my chest. But the burning in my neck flared, a reminder that I had no choice. I stepped forward, crossing the threshold into darkness deeper than any night. Inside, the air was thick and heavy, filled with whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Shapes moved at the edge of my vision, shadowy figures that vanished when I tried to focus. The floor beneath me was cold stone, cracked and worn, and the walls pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light. At the center of the chamber stood a massive structure, a throne carved from black stone and covered in the same ancient symbols. It radiated power, a dark energy that seemed to draw me closer even as it warned me to stay away. I approached cautiously, heart pounding. As I reached out to touch the throne, a voice filled the chamber, a chorus of whispers, voices layered and overlapping, speaking in a language I couldn't understand but felt deep in my soul. Suddenly, the throne flared with light, and a figure emerged, a being of shadow and flame, eyes burning with ancient fury. It spoke without words, its presence overwhelming and absolute. "You carry the mark," it said, voice like thunder. "You are bound to the ancient, the keeper of secrets and the harbinger of change." I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the weight of its gaze. The mark on my neck burned hotter than ever, and I felt a connection, a thread linking me to the ancient, to the cavern, to the very earth beneath my feet. The figure reached out, and I felt a surge of memories flood my mind, visions of a civilization rising and falling, of power wielded and lost, of secrets buried beneath ice and stone. I saw the guardian, the elevator, the endless forest, and the altar. I understood then that I was part of a cycle, a story that had played out for millennia. "You must choose," the figure said. "Embrace the ancient and become its voice, or reject it and be lost to the void." Terror and awe warred within me. I didn't know what to choose, or if I even had a choice at all. The chamber pulsed with light, the whispers growing louder, and I felt the ancient calling me home. The weight of the choice pressed down on me like the crushing cold of the Alaskan ice. The chamber's shadows seemed to close in, the whispers rising to a deafening crescendo that rattled my very soul. I was caught between worlds, the familiar and the unfathomable, the living and the ancient. I sank to my knees, the cold stone biting through my clothes, and closed my eyes. The burning on my neck flared, a searing brand that pulsed in time with the dark heartbeat of the cavern. Memories flooded my mind, visions not my own, but somehow mine to bear. I saw the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth of the guardian, the endless cycles of creation and destruction. The figure's voice echoed in my mind, a command and a plea intertwined. "You are the bridge. The ancient needs a voice, a keeper. Without you, the cycle breaks, and all is lost." I wanted to scream, to reject this fate, but the truth was undeniable. I was bound to this place, to the ancient, by something deeper than flesh and bone. The mark was not a curse, it was a bond, a responsibility. Slowly, I reached out and touched the throne. The stone was cold, but beneath it, I felt a pulse, a living force that thrummed with power and purpose. The whispers softened, becoming a single voice, clear and resonant. "Welcome, Keeper," it said. "Your journey begins now." The chamber shifted, the walls dissolving into a swirling mist that carried me away from the cavern and back to the surface. I found myself standing in the clearing where the elevator had once stood, the forest silent and still under a sky heavy with clouds. The mark on my neck had faded to a faint glow, a reminder of the bond one now carried. I was changed, no longer just a surveyor, but a guardian of secrets, a keeper of the ancient. I looked around, the weight of my new role settling over me like a mantle. The world was the same, yet everything had shifted. The forest, the land, the very air seemed charged with meaning. I knew the path ahead would be difficult. The ancient was vast and unknowable, its secrets buried deep beneath ice and stone. But I was no longer alone. The guardian's presence lingered, a silent companion in the shadows. As I walked back toward the truck, I felt the earth beneath my feet pulse with life, a heartbeat that matched my own. The ancient was watching, waiting, and I was its voice. I climbed into the truck, the engine roaring to life beneath me. The road stretched out ahead, uncertain and winding, but I was ready. Whatever lay ahead, I would face it, not as a victim, but as a keeper. The forest whispered around me, secrets carried on the wind. And as I drove away from the clearing, I knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead was shrouded in mist, the trees on either side standing like silent sentinels guarding secrets older than time itself. The truck's headlights cut through the fog, illuminating patches of frost-covered earth and twisted roots that seemed to writhe beneath the surface. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the mark on my neck pulsing faintly, a steady reminder of the bond one now carried. The world outside felt different, heavier, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. Every sound was amplified, the crunch of tires on gravel, the distant call of a raven, the whisper of wind through the pines. It was as if the forest itself was alive, watching, waiting. I tried to focus on the road, on the mundane task of driving, but my mind kept drifting back to the cavern, the guardian, and the throne. The weight of the ancient was a constant presence, a shadow that stretched across every thought. As I drove, I noticed changes in the landscape. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the sky. The air grew colder, sharper, filled with the scent of pine and something else, something metallic and old. I pulled over at a small clearing, the truck's engine idling softly. The ground was covered in a thin layer of frost, and the air was still. I stepped out, the cold biting through my jacket, and looked around. In the center of the clearing stood a stone pedestal, carved with the same ancient symbols I'd seen in the cavern and on the altar. The mark on my neck flared, and I felt a pull, a connection that drew me closer. I reached out and touched the pedestal. The stone was cold, but beneath it, I felt a pulse, a living force that thrummed with power and purpose. The whispers returned, soft and distant, like a song carried on the wind. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath my feet. The trees around me seemed to lean in, their branches reaching toward the sky as if in silent prayer. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and more insistent. I stepped back, heart pounding, as the earth split open before me. From the fissure rose a column of light, bright and blinding, cutting through the fog like a beacon. The light coalesced into a figure, tall and radiant, eyes glowing with ancient wisdom. It was the guardian, but transformed, no longer a shadowy sentinel but a being of pure energy and purpose. It spoke without words, its voice a melody that resonated deep within me. The ancient awakens. The cycle turns. You are the keeper, the bridge between worlds. I felt a surge of power, a connection to the earth, the sky, and the stars. The mark on my neck burned bright, a symbol of my new role. The guardian extended a hand, and I took it, feeling a warmth and strength I had never known. Together, we rose above the clearing, the forest stretching out beneath us like a living tapestry. As we ascended, I understood that my journey was far from over. The ancient was vast and mysterious, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. But I was ready to face whatever came next. The light carried us beyond the trees, beyond the mountains, into the endless sky. And as we soared, I knew that I was no longer just a man, I was a keeper of the ancient, a guardian of secrets, and a witness to the eternal cycle. The sky stretched endlessly above, a canvas of shifting colors, deep indigos bleeding into fiery oranges and soft purples as dawn broke over the Alaskan wilderness. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine, earth, and something older, something eternal. I stood at the edge of the clearing, the mark on my neck now a faint glow, a quiet pulse in rhythm with the heartbeat of the land itself. The journey had changed me. I was no longer the surveyor who had arrived with a clipboard and a sense of routine. I was something else now, a keeper of secrets buried beneath ice and stone, a bridge between worlds seen and unseen. The ancient had chosen me, bound me, and in doing so, had opened my eyes to a reality far beyond the mundane. As I looked out over the vast expanse of wilderness, I felt the weight of that responsibility settle over me like a mantle. The forest was alive, not just with the rustle of leaves or the calls of distant animals, but with a deeper pulse, a living memory of the past, present, and future intertwined. I thought back to the elevator, the endless descent into darkness, the rooms that defied logic, and the guardian who had marked me. Each step down had been a step deeper into a story older than humanity itself, a story of creation, destruction, and rebirth. Now, standing here, I understood that the ancient was not just a force of nature but a cycle, a pattern woven into the very fabric of existence. It was a reminder that some things are eternal, that life and death, light and shadow, are forever entwined. The mark on my neck pulsed softly, a beacon in the quiet morning light. I reached up and touched it, feeling a warmth that spread through me, filling the emptiness left by fear and uncertainty. I was no longer afraid. I was ready. Behind me, the forest stirred. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches swaying in a silent greeting. The guardian's presence lingered, a shadow at the edge of my vision, a constant reminder that I was never truly alone. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs, and began to walk. The path ahead was unknown, winding through the wilderness and beyond, but I carried with me the knowledge and power of the ancient. Whatever lay ahead, whether discovery or darkness, I would face it as the keeper, the guardian, the bridge between worlds. And as the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the land, I knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning.